The year was 1889, and Copper Creek was the kind of place where compassion had a price tag and innocence was bartered away like grain. The girl couldn't have been more than 12. Eyes the color of a winter dawn, trembling hands, yet her chin held high against the greedy stares surrounding her. William Harker was calling out his final offer when a voice rose from the shadows. Eli Morgan, once a rancher, now a hollow man estranged from his only child, saw those eyes and was struck by memory. They were his Rose's eyes, the daughter he hadn't faced in 3 long years. His words cut through the smoke-filled room. 200. Silence fell. Even the saloon piano faltered. A hermit had just gambled away the last of his savings on a girl he didn't know. What kind of wound could drive a man to do that? Was he trying to rescue someone else's daughter after failing his own? The ride back to Eli's ranch stretched 5 quiet miles. The girl, Clara, kept herself rigid, planning an escape from whatever new misery might await. When they finally reached the sagging homestead, her voice broke the silence. "I'm not your servant." Her tone was steady, though her eyes darted like a cornered animal's. Eli removed his hat, voice low. "No, you're not." The first week passed like a delicate truce. Clara swept floors, gathered eggs, and kept her distance, always poised to bolt. Eli moved carefully, like a man stepping across thin ice, wary of breaking the fragile thread of trust between them. "Easy now," Eli murmured one morning as Clara fumbled with the reins of the old mare. "Horse feels your fear." "I'm not afraid," she snapped, though her knuckles were white. He let her keep that lie. At night, Clara would sit by candlelight, sketching on scraps of paper, wild horses, windswept fields, sometimes a figure with kind eyes that didn't resemble the predators she had known. Eli, meanwhile, made his nightly pilgrimage to the small wooden cross at the edge of his land. "Found a girl needs saving," he whispered to the grave. "Sarah, her eyes are just like our Rose's. Maybe God's giving me one more chance." Clara, hidden behind the oak tree, overheard the confession. He had a daughter. That night curiosity outweighed fear. In an old chest she found letters, stacks of them, all addressed to Denver, all beginning the same, "My dearest Rose." Letters full of grief and apologies, never sent. Among them, a photograph of a girl her age, chin tilted stubbornly, eyes blazing blue. She was Rose Morgan. "You look like her." Clara spun around, letters fluttering to the floor. Eli stood in the doorway, his face more sorrow than anger. "Is that why you bought me? Because I look like your daughter?" He sank into his chair like a man crushed beneath his own regrets. "Maybe. Or maybe God thought it was time I stopped running." "What happened to her?" Clara's voice softened. "After Sarah died, I left. Couldn't stand to see her mother's face staring back at me. Sent her to my sister. She's been writing every month. For 3 years. I just never had the courage to answer." Clara picked up the scattered letters, her small hands tracing the ink. The words were raw with love, forgiveness, longing. "She doesn't hate you," Clara whispered. Her eyes blazed now, not with fear but with fire. "She misses you." That night storm clouds stacked across the horizon. For the first time in years, Eli Morgan didn't reach for a bottle. Instead, he sat at his table, pen shaking as he pressed it to paper. "My dearest Rose." 3 weeks later, hell came roaring across the plains. Flames 50 feet high, a wildfire born on the wind, devouring everything it touched. Eli had watched flames before, but nothing like the inferno that loomed now. A beast that devoured daylight, choked the sky black, and stretched across the horizon like the end of the world. "Claire, we've got maybe 2 hours before it swallows us." She stepped into the doorway, flour still clinging to her apron from baking bread. Her gaze landed on the rolling wall of fire, and she didn't blink. "What do we do?" They moved without hesitation, like 2 people bound by years instead of weeks. Buckets, tubs, pots, anything that could hold water, were filled and lined along the yard. Rags and burlap sacks soaked through and spread across fence rails. Horses were led to the far pasture, to the only patch of green that clung close to the creek. "Come on, Star," Clara coaxed, pulling at the rope. But the mare reared, eyes wide and nostrils flaring. The thick, sweet burn of smoke driving her wild. "Easy, girl, easy." Star ripped free, bolting straight toward the approaching blaze. "Damn it, Star!" Eli shouted. But Clara didn't pause. She broke into a run after the terrified animal, her small frame swallowed almost instantly by the thick curtain of smoke. "Claire, no." Eli's voice cracked, terror crushing his chest. Not again. Not another girl lost because of him. He wouldn't carry that weight twice. He plunged in after her, flames licking at his sleeves, smoke scalding his lungs until every breath felt like fire poured inside. Through the roaring chaos, he caught sight of her. Clara stood ankle-deep in mud by the creek bed, hands outstretched, whispering soft words to calm the trembling mare. "It's all right, girl, we're going home together." Eli staggered forward, seized both Clara and Star, and dragged them into the shallow water. They crouched there, pressed against each other, while the fire stormed above them. A roof of hellfire that turned the world into a nightmare of heat and noise. In the muddy water, Clara's small hand reached for his. Not out of terror, but trust. Hours later, when the smoke thinned and the sky bled gray, they crawled out of the creek, coughing and raw. Half the ranch was ash, barn gone, fences charred, chicken coop vanished. But the house still stood, and they were still alive. "We made it," Clara whispered, astonished. "No," Eli rasped. "We made it together." They were still holding hands. But peace never lasted in Copper Creek. Not with men like William Harker lurking in the wings. Word traveled fast in small towns, and soon Sheriff May Collins found her desk covered in papers. Child trafficking, the lawyer declared, spreading documents across the worn wood. Unlawful custody. This man purchased a girl like she was cattle. Collins leaned back, staring at the accusations. She remembered Eli from before the bottle, before grief hollowed him into a shell of a man. "These are heavy charges, Mr. Harker. I'll need to investigate proper." Harker's lips curled into a smile colder than January frost. "Of course, Sheriff. Justice must prevail." The courthouse hadn't seen this kind of frenzy since the train robbery of '85. Every bench groaned under the weight of townsfolk. Some curious, some ravenous for gossip, like carrion birds circling a carcass. Clara sat in the front row, hands folded in her lap. Eli shuffled in chains, guarded by a lawyer who looked like he'd rather be shoveling manure than standing in that room. "I intended to give that child a proper home," Harker testified, voice dripping with piety. "Instead, she was sold to a drunkard, a man who couldn't even protect his own daughter." Gasps rippled through the room. In Copper Creek, reputation weighed more than truth, and Eli's had long since been spent. The prosecutor painted him a monster, Clara a frightened child too scared to speak against him. But then Clara rose. Every head turned to the little girl in a faded blue dress, her spine straight, eyes blazing as though she'd come to stare down the devil himself. "That's not what happened," she said. "Young lady, you're not." "He didn't buy me," she cut in, her voice slicing the silence. "He saved me." The room froze. "You want to know the truth? I'll tell you. He stopped Mr. Harker from doing to me what he's already done to other girls." "Lies." Harker leapt to his feet. "She's been manipulated, brainwashed." "I wasn't brainwashed," Clara snapped. "I was taught. Taught to read, to write. Taught that someone could care for me without asking for anything in return." Her voice cracked, years of fear spilling out in every word. "He calls me Clara Rose not because I belong to him, but because that's how his daughter signs her letters. The daughter he loves, but is too afraid to face." Eli's head shot up. She knew. She'd read Rose's letters. "If loving someone enough to sacrifice everything is a crime, then arrest me too," Clara finished, tears blazing in her eyes. "Because I'd rather live with the man who chose to save me than with the one who tried to buy me for his sickness." For a long heartbeat, the room stood frozen. Then Sheriff May Collins began to clap. The gallery was restless at first, only whispers, then louder voices until half the courthouse was echoing with support. The judge's gavel came down with finality, charges dismissed. Harker rose stiffly, his jaw locked in fury, each step toward the door radiating contempt. At the threshold he turned, his eyes burning with venom. "This isn't finished, Morgan." 3 quiet weeks followed, their piece of fragile disguise. Clara practiced braiding her hair, the way Sarah once did, fingers learning the rhythm of memory. Eli, after years of hesitation, finally sent Rose the letter, 20 pages of apologies, longing, and words he should have spoken long ago. Evenings were soft now, she at the table sketching, he shaping scraps of wood into figures. They seemed like kin who had always belonged to each other. "That one's you," Clara murmured, showing him her drawing, an image of a weary man coaxing a frightened horse to trust again. "Is that how you see me?" Eli asked, half smiling. "No," she said, "that's what hope looks like." But the serenity shattered with the drum of hooves. Too many riders for friendly calls, too late an hour for honest trade. Harker arrived with 4 companions, firebrands blazing beneath a sky scattered with stars. His patience for courts and verdicts had run dry. Eli stepped outside, rifle in hand. Behind him, Clara pressed to the doorway. "Good evening, Eli," Harker sneered. "Fine night to watch something burn." The men fanned out, circling like wolves scenting weakness. The smell of kerosene hung sharp in the air. "You want me, Harker," Eli said, his voice hard. "Take it up with me and leave the girl be." But Harker's grin cut through the night. "She's the reason we're here. That sweet little speech of hers humiliated me. That needs balancing." Clara moved past Eli, standing tall on the porch. "I'm not afraid of you anymore." "You should be, girl," Harker hissed. "You ought to be." Torches flew through the dark like fiery comets. The barn went up first, hay and timber exploding into a roaring blaze. "Clara! Into the root cellar, now!" Eli shouted. "Not without you," she cried. "Go!" The crack of a rifle split the chaos. Eli jerked, a red bloom spreading across his chest. He staggered but stayed upright, firing back with grim resolve as Clara screamed his name. Each shot bought her seconds, driving the men back. She reached the cellar just as the house caught. Inside the darkness, Clara listened, the furious roar of fire above, Eli's voice weakening outside. She could have stayed, safe beneath the earth. She should have. But love doesn't bargain with reason. Clara burst from the cellar into smoke and flame. The heat clawed at her skin, her lungs choking on ash. Still, she pressed forward, searching. She found him by the kitchen wall, collapsed in blood and cinders. Too heavy to stand, too stubborn to surrender. "Come on, Eli, we can still make it." "Can't, too heavy." "Leave me." "No. You saved me first." "I won't." A flaming beam crashed nearby, showering sparks. The house was breaking apart. With desperation, with strength she didn't know she had, Clara hauled him up. Step by agonizing step, dragging him inch by inch until they reached the doorway. They fell together into the yard as the house roared into a tower of fire behind them. Eli's breath rattled, shallow, fading, each one a battle. Clara clung to him, refusing to let the night claim him. The flames cast long, shifting shadows, making the blood on his shirt gleam almost black. Eli's breaths came ragged, his strength leaving him with each heartbeat. With trembling hands, he pulled a sealed envelope from his coat and forced it into Clara's grip. "For Rose," he whispered, his voice breaking. Tell her I finally learned how to be a father." Clara's eyes brimmed with tears, her hands pressing against his wound as if sheer will could keep him tethered. "Don't say that," she begged. "Don't you dare leave me." But Eli's expression was strangely calm. A faint smile curled on his lips, not of pain, but of peace. "You gave me something I thought I'd never find again." "Clara Rose," he murmured, his words faltering yet filled with conviction. "Flames, they don't destroy love. They make it burn brighter." The fire roared around them, but he closed his eyes without fear. Gratitude was etched on his face, not sorrow. Clara's scream tore through the night, raw and piercing, carrying a grief so heavy it silenced even the hardened men who had followed Harker. Heads bowed, not out of loyalty, but shame. On the horizon, hooves thundered. Sheriff May arrived with townsfolk drawn by the inferno's glow. Amid the chaos, Harker tried to slip away into the darkness, but May caught him by the arm, shackling him where he stood. At last, the weight of justice fell. Yet none of that mattered to Clara. She cradled Eli's still body, refusing to release him, terrified that letting go would mean losing him all over again. 2 weeks later, the whistle of a train echoed through Copper Creek. Rose Morgan stepped onto the platform, her face streaked with grief. At her father's grave, she unfolded the final letter he had left behind. Her tears splashed against the ink, blurring the words but not the meaning. My dearest Rose, I've found what I thought was gone forever, the courage to be your father. Clara showed me that love is not about perfection, but about showing up even when you're terrified, even when you're broken. Forgive me for waiting so long. Love her, Rose, as the sister she has already become to you. Forever your father, Eli. Rose's shoulders shook as she pressed the letter to her chest. When she lifted her gaze, she saw Clara standing a few steps away, hesitant, clutching wildflowers as if they were a fragile apology. Without words, Rose opened her arms. Clara rushed into them, and together, two wounded souls began stitching themselves back together. In time, the ranch was rebuilt, but more than timber and fences rose from the ashes. Clara and Rose created something greater, the Rose Garden Art School. A place where young girls who carried their own scars could come and discover that pain wasn't the end of their story. Years later, Clara stood at the front of a classroom filled with 12 girls, each carrying burdens that mirrored her own past. Brushes dipped in paint, they worked on canvases, their hands trembling but steadying with hope. Above them hung the school's very first painting, Eli Morgan, captured forever in a field of wildflowers. His smile, youthful and unburdened, watched over those he would never meet, yet whose lives he had already touched. Fire tried to take everything, Clara told them softly, her own brush moving across the canvas, but it couldn't take love. It couldn't take hope. And it can never take the choice to stand for one another. Beneath Eli's portrait hung a simple plaque, "Fire didn't win." As the sun sank, casting the sky in shades of healing gold and rose, the halls of the art school echoed with laughter, creativity, and life. From burned earth had grown a garden of second chances. And in Copper Creek, Eli Morgan's name was not forgotten. They told his story by lamplight and in hushed tones, of a broken man who discovered that saving someone else was the only way to save himself. Some whispered that if you looked into the flames on a quiet night, you could still glimpse his spirit, not in torment, but in teaching. A reminder to all who watched that love, like fire, spreads when it is shared, and neither time, nor storm, nor death itself can extinguish it. If this story touched your heart, join us in keeping it alive. Share it, so others may be reminded that even in the fiercest flames, fire never truly wins.